Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president in 2024. The question is, who will be his running mate? Just 5 months out from Election Day, and he still is keeping us in suspense. But now, after waiting and waiting, we finally have some concrete hints. Trump just submitted a list of names for proper vetting to become his running mate. So let's take a look at the prospects for the number 2 spot in the executive branch and figure out who Trump is most likely to pick, who will be the best pick, and who is the best pick that is most likely. Let's get into it. So Trump gave us a list of names who are presumably in the final round of vetting for vice president. These names are Governor Doug Burgum, Senator J.D. Vance, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Tim Scott, Senator Tom Cotton, Representative Byron Donalds, Representative Elise Stefanik, and former HUD Secretary Ben Carson. But on top of these finalists, many more names have been floated. Trump, a master of show business, knows how to keep us in suspense, and he knows how to set up a plot twist. It is very possible he picks someone who isn't currently in the spotlight, somebody who is not on that list. He has said many times before, there are many good people with relatively low name ID in the Republican Party. So, we will be expanding upon the list of those who are being vetted and talk about 15 candidates for the spot of vice president on the Trump 2024 ticket. Let's begin. We're going to start with Governor Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum seems to be getting a lot of undeserved hype recently. Sure, he's done well in TV interviews defending Trump in the media, but his record as a governor screams anything but MAGA. He is a business Republican, a free trader, not a social conservative, and not a national populist. He has supported globalist carbon neutral policies, and he's called for the GOP to eliminate its opposition to LGBTQ causes in 2020. Then he ran for president, where the most notable thing he contributed to the race was a retro campaign logo that a lot of people really liked. Now he's being hyped up as some great patriot and being memed into looking like George Washington reincarnated. Maybe he wouldn't be the worst choice for VP. He is basically Mike Pence 2.0 from before the 2020 election, where he stabbed Trump in the back. He'll be quiet and let Trump be the star of the show. He will act loyal, but deep down, his own ideology is very different from Donald Trump's platform. He would send up red flags with the base if he were made the heir apparent in 2028. On the other hand, just as many people thought Desantis would have probably beaten Mike Pence in 2024 if Trump had won a second consecutive term, I think Burgum wouldn't have the 2028 nomination on lock even if he does become VP in 2024. Either way, I don't think he's all that likely to be VP. He makes much more sense as Secretary of Energy or even Secretary of Treasury, so I'll label him as a B tier for now. Next up, we'll move one state south, from the governor of North Dakota to the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem. A lot of people like Kristi Noem for VP. She's a woman. She's got a great knack for good speeches and TV ads. But recently she had a whole controversy pop up about one of her dogs on the farm. I won't say exactly what she did, but many of you probably know what I'm talking about. And it has made her completely unlikable to a huge chunk of the Republican base. This alone gets her ranked as electoral poison to the Donald Trump ticket. But that is not the only problem with Kristi Noem. The real problem is her corruption. Kristi Noem is bought and paid for by Sanford Health, which led to her working against the state legislature's efforts to ban men and women's sports in public schools and colleges. But the corruption goes even deeper than that. Don't believe me? There's a video by Electright breaking down just how corrupt Kristi Noem really is. A link will be in the description down below. Noem also continues to lie about taking a stand during COVID. The truth is, she wanted to lock down the state, but her conservative state legislature blocked her from being able to do this. Speaking of the state legislature, Noem is supporting primary challengers against real conservatives in her state legislature, hoping to replace them with neoliberal rhino candidates. For example, Governor Noem teamed up with State Senator Lee Schoenbeck, a man who has called Trump a deranged, narcissistic madman and called Josh Hawley a traitor for January 6th, and has left these comments up on Facebook to this day. She teamed up with this guy to primary the State Freedom Caucus VP and the Freedom Caucus Secretary, with people who have literally been lifelong registered Democrats until asked to run by Republican leadership. Very few are talking about this for some reason. She may also be a sleeper agent for the deep state. When you look at her actual record on the issues, it looks much more like globalism than America First populism. But she's really good at acting in her overproduced TV commercials to make you think otherwise. Kind of like Nikki Haley, except a little more likable before the whole dog incident. Lastly, she really wants the job. As in, she really, really wants to be VP. It's unsettling, really. At a rally in South Dakota, Noem's team put up Trump Noem 2024 campaign signs, and behind the scenes, it sounded like Trump was pretty pissed at that level of grifting. Overall, I don't think Trump is going to pick Kristi Noem for VP. He has taken her off the list, but she was on the list for so long, it didn't feel right leaving her out of this video. Kristi Noem is a terrible choice for VP, and I'm glad she seems to be out of the running. She goes in the political poison category on our tier list. Next up, we have Senator Tim Scott. What can I say about Tim Scott that hasn't already been said? We all know why the guy is on this list. It's the same reason that makes him unique as a Republican senator. That being said, on policy, he is not compatible with the America First movement. He is way too hawkish on Israel and even Ukraine. He attacked Trump as not being pro-Israel enough. But most importantly, his entire campaign for president was predicated on the idea that our nation is not a nation in decline. That is a fundamental concept to the whole idea of making America great again. It is no longer as great as it once was before. If you cannot accept that basic reality that our nation is about to go over a cliff, you are not serious enough to be in such a position of power at such a pivotal time. The Uniparty would be fawning over the idea of making Tim Scott president, one way or another. A pro-BLM Republican. Really? At least the memes of Mike Pence being super anti-LGBTQ scared the left against trying to make him president. Tim Scott has memes that go in the exact opposite direction of that. Tim Scott doesn't scare anyone. He has no edge and he offers no benefit to this race. I'm ranking him in D tier. Florida Representative Byron Donalds. Unlike the last person I mentioned, Byron Donalds is not a pro-DEI congressman. He is quite literally one of the best guys we have in Congress, easily in the top 20 House Republicans. Both times when he was a candidate for Speaker, he was the voice against the establishment. There are only two downsides to Donalds for VP. One is that he is currently serving in Florida, and to be the running mate of President Trump, he would either have to resign and move, presumably back to Brooklyn where he was born, or else Trump would have to change his residence away from Florida, either back to New York or to Nevada or to one of his other properties. We call this the double Florida flaw, and it applies to several people on this list. This is because both slots of a presidential ticket cannot be from the same home state, or else the state's electoral votes will be nullified if won. Trump needs to win Florida, and it needs to count. So either his running mate can't be from Florida, or Trump can't be registered as being from Florida. The only other downside is that Byron Donalds is exceptionally young and exceptionally talented, and he could be a major asset to our movement if he spends more time in Congress climbing the ladder to leadership or running for governor of Florida or for Senate. But if he's named VP in 2024, I don't see him running for a lower office afterwards. Though it isn't impossible, it has been done before. Whether or not he could win the nomination in 2028, I don't know. Either way, he would be great as vice president, and he has shown very good chemistry campaigning with Donald Trump. I'm placing him in A tier. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, he could have had it all. He probably would have been the front runner for vice president and for 2028 if he had just waited his turn and backed Donald Trump in 2024. Instead, he ran an awful campaign against Trump with no charisma and ended up humiliating himself. He has since gotten back on board the Trump train and is doing his best to help Trump reunite the party and win back the White House. I don't think Trump will pick DeSantis, again because of the double Florida flaw, but more importantly because the trust between the two just seems to have been broken beyond repair. But if Trump does choose to move his residence and pick Ron DeSantis, it would probably be a very strong ticket, uniting the majority of the party. It is just really unlikely. But I'll put Ron DeSantis in B tier for now. Next up, we have former Congressman and New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin. Doing this one quickly, Trump wants to put New York in play, and Lee Zeldin has shown us that he knows just how to do that when he ran for governor in 2022, and came closer than anyone else has in years. He also single-handedly won us a House majority because of the extra seats we got in New York. Zeldin is quiet, which balances nicely against Trump's loud personality. But on the issues, he's a good bit more moderate. He is liked by the GOP establishment and could help reunite the Republican Party. But he is also Jewish, which could energize Jewish voters, but could also turn some Christians away. If Trump passes the torch to Lee Zeldin in 2028, as the GOP nominee for president, he would almost certainly lose by losing voters who will only vote for a Christian. And there are many of those voters still around today. I would consider myself one of them, along with many other Catholics and Protestants. He wouldn't be the weakest choice for VP, but he also isn't the best, and he certainly is not a good choice for 2028. All things considered, I'll put Lee Zeldin solidly in the C tier. Next up, we have New York Representative Elise Stefanik, another member of Congress from New York. Trump is having her vetted for VP. She's in the final shortlist. She's very ambitious, having campaigned hard to replace Liz Cheney in the House GOP leadership. She's also been smart enough to cozy up to Trump, even when she herself is not very Trumpian as a Republican. She would be an establishment-friendly choice without sounding the alarms for most of MAGA. She is a woman, which Trump in the past has believed to be important, but since then clearly has moved away from being a core requirement. If picked, she'd be okay for VP. She's not a successor, she cannot carry the movement, and like Tim Scott, I believe the Uniparty would be itching to remove Trump and install Stefanik as president. The first female president, exactly how Nixon predicted it. I'd rank her as about even with Lee Zeldin, C tier. Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek was clearly the star of the show in the Republican primary debates. This is because he was basically a stand-in for Trump who did not attend the debates. Because of this, Vivek has risen to stardom. He's a young, charismatic outsider. He has his own flavor of MAGA, with a little bit more of a libertarian lens than most others who label themselves as America First. He would also scare the Uniparty as vice president, as they would not want to accidentally make him president by removing Trump. Trump did not list him in the VP vetting list, so it does not seem like he's still in consideration for VP. He is most likely going to have some other role in the Trump administration, since he has no prior experience as a politician. He'd be a strong contender for VP, but if he is the nominee in 2028, again like Zeldin, he would struggle to carry the party forward by alienating Christian voters. He talks about believing in God, but Hinduism is not even monotheistic. They believe in many gods. It's just something that too many die-hard Christian conservatives would not be able to accept from their nominee. It would solidify the idea of a post-Christian America, and I just don't think we're there yet. We're not that desperate for a right-wing government. But that's 2028. Considering him as VP in 2024 alone, he would still be a strong choice if chosen, so I'm going to rank him in B tier. Next, there are two names floating around which absolutely need to be rejected. Those names are Nikki Haley and Tom Cotton. If Nikki Haley had somehow won the Republican primary, in all likelihood, Carson would have been her running mate. This is because they are both fully invested in the old ways of the Bush GOP. They represent the endless foreign wars wing of the Republican Party. This is antithetical to America First and would likely destroy the second Trump administration. I believe it is almost impossible that Donald Trump would pick Nikki Haley to be VP. He has openly said he would never do it, but Tom Cotton is another story. But if for some reason he did do it, I would view that as the end of MAGA as we know it. Like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson have both said, it would be a suicidal choice from President Trump, and many of us would not vote for him in November based off of that running mate. Tom Cotton, I could maybe hold my nose and vote for because he is so boring he would plausibly lose the primary in 2028. And on top of that, he has been good on some domestic policy in the Senate. He is just garbage when it comes to foreign policy. But I am truly never Nikki, not for president and not even for vice president. Tom Cotton goes in D tier, Nikki Haley goes into electoral poison. Now for two honorable mentions before we get to the final three. The perfect Trump VP, the perfect person to be the successor to Trump, is Tucker Carlson, another outsider who understands our movement better than any elected politician. In a way, he is more Trumpian than Donald Trump, but at the same time, he's more grounded and could easily connect well with the voters he needs to win. He is extremely popular with both boomers who watched him on Fox, as well as Zoomers and even millennials who have watched his interviews on X and YouTube. Tucker has the energy and is probably the only Republican who could draw crowds even a fraction the size of Trump's rallies. If he were to carry the movement forward in 2028, he is the perfect torchbearer for national populism going forward, except for one major flaw. He doesn't want it. I see that as endearing and makes me want to vote for him to be our movement's leader even more in 2028. We need someone who doesn't want to be president, but will lead us out of necessity, out of patriotism. Maybe it'll be the biggest surprise ever in RNC history, but more likely, I'm just dreaming. I hope he runs in 2028 with Trump's endorsement, but I won't hold my breath. People didn't think Nigel Farage would ever seriously run for Prime Minister of the UK, but look at him right now. Anything is possible. But for now, Tucker ends up in the dream tier. I also wanted to add one more name that nobody has discussed. If Trump is dead set on picking a woman, which it no longer looks like he really is, he should pick a woman who would actually work well alongside him. And while most of the women being talked about on that shortlist, they suck. One person who wouldn't be awful, though, someone who would actually make for an awesome VP, but someone almost nobody has really mentioned, is Congresswoman Mary Miller of Illinois. On stage together, they look like a perfect match. Trump Miller even makes for a good bumper sticker. I'm sure many of you don't know Mary Miller all that well. She's not a statewide elected official. She's not from a red state or even from a swing state, but she still is one of the best members of Congress by far. She is great on all the issues, even to the right of Donald Trump on some issues. She's loyal to Trump and his agenda, the America First agenda. She's 13 years younger than President Trump, and she's a woman from the Midwest, which is a demographic Trump needs help to win. She's also a family woman, a mother of 7 and a grandmother of 17. She's also a part of the 20 conservative Republicans who pushed back against Kevin McCarthy in January of 2023, forcing him to make concessions to become Speaker. And I don't think she will run for president in 2028. While she is from a blue state in Illinois, she's not from the city of Chicago either. She still fits in to that Great Lakes Rust Belt region, and it would speak very well to voters in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, and Ohio, the states that won Trump 2016 and lost him 2020. Has Trump ever floated this idea? No. Do I think there's a remote possibility of it happening? No, but this is my video, so I'll include her anyway. Mary Miller is my personal number one pick if Trump was going to choose a woman for VP. I would actually be excited to vote for a Trump Miller ticket, and I think she would do an outstanding job as vice president. Does that mean there's any real chance of her getting the job? Probably not, but she's still my dark horse candidate. Now, for my top 3. In third place, I will put Marco Rubio. He has come a long way since 2016 and is now a top 10 Republican senator. He has recently come out in favor of Trump's mass deportation plans, and at the same time, his Hispanic background, as well as being fluent in Spanish, would help the ticket reach out to Hispanic voters. I'm not saying that should be our priority, but it is still a net benefit. Rubio is also Catholic, which is an important voting bloc for deciding the 2024 election, one which Republicans should have locked up, but because of Trump's recent statements on abortion, a lot of Catholics are kind of shaky on whether or not they want to vote for Donald Trump. Rubio will help us solidify this voting bloc. Rubio is from Florida, again triggering the double Florida flaw, which means he would have to resign and move to run for VP, unless Trump decides to do that himself. That might be complicated with all the pending legal issues, so we shouldn't trust that Trump can move before the election. But if we get past that hurdle, at least Florida has a titanium bench, and there are plenty of great people who could fill that vacant Senate seat. Ron DeSantis is the governor of the state, and hopefully he wouldn't pick an awful replacement. Because of the double Florida flaw, as well as Rubio's past as being a little too establishment friendly, Rubio is going to stay in A tier. He's good electorally, but what he would do as a candidate in 2028 would be a bit nerve-wracking. If he is VP, I will not complain, and I think he would actually be very good for the job. Finally, let's get to our last 2 candidates, both of which are going straight up into S tier for very different reasons. First, we have former HUD Secretary Ben Carson. Ben Carson is a Trump loyalist. In 2016, he was the only other candidate to rank number 1 in the RCP polling average ahead of Donald Trump, even if it was only for about a day. Trump has lots of respect for Ben Carson, and Carson has lots of respect for Donald Trump. They would work very well together. The two have deeply contrasting styles. Trump is a firebrand. Carson is a statesman. Like Pence, he would have a softer touch. He would be a great asset in campaigning to suburban moms, as well as with evangelical Christians, many of whom are upset with Trump over his recent statements on abortion. Carson would be good at putting out those fires where needed. If I were running Trump's campaign, I would send Ben Carson on a campaign through the suburbs, visiting and speaking to evangelicals in the swing states. He would also work very well in the inner city, talking to groups disaffected with Biden, but still a little too turned off by Trump's style. Carson also does a great job defending Trump in interviews with the media, even if he does so in a far more relaxed way than Burgum, Rubio, or J.D. Vance. Ben Carson has been with Donald Trump since the beginning. They have a very special relationship, and I do think Trump views him as a wise friend and advisor. If Carson is the VP, he will likely step aside in 2028, since he also is up there in the years with Donald Trump, passing the torch to the next generation of America First, whoever that may be. On the other hand, we have Senator J.D. Vance, not a candidate who will step aside in 2028, but one who would be stepping into the spotlight as the torchbearer for MAGA and America First. I already know there's going to be some of you who do not like J.D. Vance for one reason or another. He wasn't pro-Trump enough in 2015, or he's too pro-Israel in 2024, or you just don't trust Peter Thiel. I get it, but the truth is nobody in politics is perfect. Not Vance, not Trump, not Peter Thiel, not Kanye West, not Tucker, not anybody. But J.D. Vance is our guy. He's the best the Republican Party has to offer immediately post-Trump. He is the most America First senator we currently have. You literally cannot argue this. When comparing him to his stances in 2015, he has explained how his political realignment coincided with his conversion to Catholicism in 2019. That sounds a whole lot like many people I know who converted to Catholicism and left behind their normie-con libertarian phase. Vance is from Ohio, the Trump state, the populist state. He is the representation of the 2016 political realignment brought about by Donald Trump. He is the logical heir to the movement as of now, more so than Ron DeSantis ever really was. The only downside is that if Trump picks Vance, we end up with a rhino replacing him in the Senate, since DeWine is an awful governor. Whether or not this is a sacrifice we should be willing to make is up for legitimate debate. If Trump picks JD Vance for vice president in 2024, I will proudly support him in 2024 and for president in 2028. He is exactly what our goal has been for some time now, to ensure that Trump's successor is to the nationalist right of Donald Trump, to keep our movement moving forward. Vance is that guy. He is a national populist, Anglo-American Catholic from coal country. He has my support, and he gets placed in S tier. So looking at all 15 names we have considered, here are my concluding thoughts. Most of this list is meh. There are some really bad names, and there are a couple of really good names. The best choice out of anyone would be Tucker Carlson, taking nobody out of an office they currently serve and bringing another outsider into the fold. Vance is very similar, an outsider who only entered politics 2 years ago. Both really understand the Trump base and how it differentiates from the Republican establishment. Ben Carson is my choice if we cannot get one of those two. Frankly, I think Carson is the most likely choice, a loyalist through and through who will not take the focus off of Donald Trump, but only adds to the ticket with demographics where Trump could use some help. If he needs to pick a woman, I would love to see Mary Miller join the ticket and be the nominee for vice president, even though that is basically impossible and most likely will not happen. Tulsi Gabbard would have been another really good choice for VP, but she took herself out of consideration a few weeks ago, and that's why I didn't include her on this list. There really is no woman on the public shortlist that is really exciting, but I think he's gotten over the idea of needing to pick a woman by now. Whoever it is, we're still going to have to work hard to get Trump elected in November, and work even harder if they do make him the political prisoner they want him to be. His vice president will have to carry an even heavier burden if this becomes a reality. But all of his surrogates, everyone on this list, will have to get up and pick up the slack and campaign for him too, not just the VP. We are in for one of the most wild and historic campaigns in U.S. history, and I'm excited to be here for the ride. So stay tuned and don't miss a thing. America first. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment down below telling me who you want to see for vice president and why. Also, make sure to check out the links to the Etsy shop and Freedom 2.0 down below to help support the channel. You can also follow us on social media. Again, links down below. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and God bless.